Hi, welcome. Yeah. Hi, thank you for coming to our town hall. There's a lot going on. We have a lot of speakers. I just want to remind a few folks of a few things. One is that some folks here are immunocompromised, so we are asking people to mask up. Obviously, if you're eating and you're in the back, we understand, but as much as you can keep your mask on, please do. Thank you. Again, we have restrooms are here. There's a children's table in that corner if you want to do some coloring, all ages. What else? There's interpretation. If you need Spanish or Bangla, you're welcome to take an interpretation kit and just bring it back at the end. Yeah, I think that's it. So let's start. So thank you for coming, everybody. My name is Memo Salazar. I'm the co-chair of the Western Queens Community Land Trust. We've been around a few years now, and we've been working with a lot of other wonderful groups like Chaya, who's here, and elected officials and so on. And we're here today to talk about some potential bills that are sitting in City Council. So it's all about land, and we've never really figured out what to do with land. People have been sharing it, fighting over it since the beginning of time. And this specific patch of land that we're standing on has had people living on it continually for the last 3,000 years. We don't even know what they called themselves for a lot of that time, but the Lenape were here when the Dutch came. You probably know that story. So we just want to acknowledge that we're just one of many people, and there will be people after us also trying to figure out how to share this land that we're standing on. So we should acknowledge that. As we're going today. And now in 1955, moving forward a few years, in New York City created a program called the Mitchell-Lama Program, which allowed over 100,000 New Yorkers to purchase homes and apartments here in New York at very, very truly affordable rates. It was for working class folks. It was a really successful program. There's still people living today in Mitchell-Lama houses. However, over the years, that has been slowly gutted and eroded. People had the ability to sort of flip their buildings. They would vote and create and decide they were going to turn that housing into market rate housing. And so the affordable housing stock has slowly been depleted. That's just one example, but it's just an example of where we're at now. So the reason I'm telling you all this is because 70 years later, here we are. The housing programs have eroded, and there's a third, at the same time, 1/3 of New Yorkers are severely rent burdened. We have close to 80,000 people who are now living without a home in the city. And things are so bad that we have, for example, one of our own community members right now, his name is Sugar Ray. Some of you might know him. And he's camped out in front of the DOE building. He's on a hunger strike, and he's doing it because he is tired of living in a city that has ignored his needs, his people's needs, for as long as he can remember, way before he was around, way before I was around. And he's frustrated, doesn't know what else to do. So he's on a hunger strike to call attention to that fact. And we support him, and a lot of people support him, and we all understand, because all of you, I'm sure, have to deal with the same thing of how are you going to afford to live in the city in the next 10, 5, 1 year, trying to figure that out. We're all trying to figure that out, which is why we're here today, to help the city get back on track. So last November, you voted yes to a few ballot questions you might remember. They were racial justice questions. The first one was, and I quote, "To revise and reimagine our foundations, our structures, institutions, and laws to promote justice and equity for all New Yorkers." So that was one thing that we voted on as a city. We also voted to establish a chief equity officer, right, whose job is to work with all the city agencies to make sure that everything New York City does is specifically serving those of us who, and I quote, "have been negatively affected by previous policies or actions." That would include immigrants, Black and brown people, anyone who identifies with the letters LGBT and Q. And the third thing that we voted for is that the city has to come up with a true cost of living measure, one that actually makes sense. So, for example, right now, if you build affordable housing, or quote-unquote affordable housing, according to the statistics we use, The average New Yorker makes $93,000 a year, and an average family of 3 makes $120,000. Now, I've never met anybody that actually thinks those numbers make any sense, which is why we voted for this measure, to come up with something that's helpful. But the problem is every time that someone builds a new building, those are the numbers that they use to justify the affordable housing. You know this, we know this, right? So the question is, if we voted for these measures, what is the city now going to do to make those measures a reality? And so we're here to help the city. We have some suggestions. So we have some bills that are up that we're going to discuss. Hopefully, if we can pass those, and we need your help to pass those, we can start bringing programs back like the Mitchell-Lama program and make truly affordable housing, not quote-unquote affordable housing, here in New York City. So that's why we're here. So thank you for coming. All right. So we have some electeds that are here with us, and they have a few words. So I'd like to first bring Assemblymember Jessica Gonzalez Rojas. I think she's here. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Hey. Oh, it's so good to be here. I actually saw this online, and I texted Annetta, and I was like, can I stop by? So thank you all for being here. This is an incredibly important conversation in this moment. As a state legislator, we're talking, I think, a lot about city issues today. But as a state legislator, I have a lot of, we have a lot of power over housing issues. And I have to say, as someone who's just comes from activism, organizing, and social justice work, to becoming a state assembly member, I come with a very particular angle and perspective. And I'm really fighting alongside folks in the community that are looking to build power. My values are equity, dignity, and justice. So talking about community land trusts and thinking of it as an equitable and democratic process in which land that is owned by the people is accessible to the people, right? And that we could raise our families and thrive here without the corporatization of land and the ways in which development has pushed us out of our own neighborhoods. So this is a really powerful conversation. A couple things on the state level that I want to flag. I'm a co-sponsor of TOPA, which is the Tenant Opportunity for the Purchase Act. A really, really, really important bill and a really first step towards this incredible vision and work. We're also looking at making sure we can get accessory dwelling units legalized here in New York City, which is really important as well. And we're also looking to pass bills like good cause eviction to prevent greedy landlords from evicting our families and preventing extreme rate hikes. So those are just some of the fights that we're having. There's also the Housing Access Voucher Program and lots of other things that we're advocating for. But it's really spaces like this in which we're coming together to, again, build power, share knowledge, figure out organizing strategies so we can get this done both in the state and the city level. So I'm so, so grateful to be here. Thank you to all the organizations. And it's really just inspiring to see a room full of people on this very cold day to come talk about community land trust. So thank you so much for being here, and I'm with you all the way.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Okay. So next we have, I think he's here, New York City Public Advocate Jumaane Williams. Oh, is he still outside? Oh, he's coming. Okay, oh, come on up then, yes. Why not?
How's it going? Good to see you. How's everything? Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good to see you all. Well, it's so good to see, as Assemblymember Gonzalez was saying, on a very cold day, we're out here, and I'm sorry that I'm just getting here now. I was giving my kids dinner before, too, and eating myself, too. But it is so nice to be here and to see you all. And I just want to say a big, big thank you to all the groups that are here. I know Chaya, Western Queens CLT, Edgemere CLT, Ravenswood CLT. Let's give everyone a big round of applause. Thank you all so much. You all are really on the front lines of work that we need to be investing in, frankly, as a city and as a state. When we talk about creating affordable housing, what that really means, frankly, as for myself, and some of you may know too, before being a city council member, I was a longtime civil rights lawyer for tenants fighting against housing discrimination and against gentrification and displacement. And in these fights, I have to be honest with you, seeing all the discussions now at the city level and on the state level about housing, I think what's missing from this is really conversations about what are the most effective ways to actually build true affordable housing, true social housing, and how critical that is to actually stop displacement. And one of the most powerful tools to do so is through community land trusts and other vehicles. That is the most effective way to ensure the land, the housing, stays affordable and keeps people not just in their homes, but in our communities. And so you all have led the fight on these issues. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor on the numerous pieces of legislation that we have at the council level. I know we're also fighting on the state level. But the fact of the matter is, we cannot actually advance housing justice in this city and the state without investing in community land trusts. And I am excited to partner with you all to find the most creative ways and the space to do so here in Queens and across New York City. And as someone who also chairs our Parks Committee in our City Council, I know firsthand how important it is to think about our green space, our land, our parks, to combine it into a way to truly protect communities and to tie it into housing, and how all of those different issues are linked together. But, in seeing you all here, I have to commend you all for really the way in which you have put these issues on the map, not just legislatively, but actively exploring ways to bring community land trusts to Western Queens, to Southeast Queens, to all over our city. The work you are all doing is on the front lines of, I think, what is actually an essential part of building affordable housing. And without thinking about CLTs, and I see this more and more now in the conversations I'm having, in the policy discussions, even at the city council, at City Hall, I keep thinking about how without you all and the work that you're doing, the conversation about actually anti-displacement work and about housing as truly affordable with the right meaning that should have, those conversations can't be happening. So I want to say to you all, thank you all so much. We'll continue the fight on the city level. We'll continue the fight on the state level. I'm proud with Councilmember Shahana Hanif to be the co-sponsors of the resolution working with Chaya on the city level, calling on our state to finally legalize basement apartments, which is what we need to do. That's right. And we'll keep pushing that issue. That's something that affects us directly here in Queens, and we know that. I look forward to working with you all to continue to think of creative ways to make sure we can keep our homes truly affordable, the land truly affordable, and to create models of low-income home ownership that really is the vehicle to creating intergenerational wealth. So thank you all so much. I know Councilmember Natasha Williams wanted to be here too. She couldn't come, unfortunately, because of another event in her district, but she did ask me to convey how supportive she is too of the work that we're doing for CLTs and how much she would love to see and work with you all to establish a CLT in Southeast Queens too. So Councilmember Williams made sure to let me know that. That's right. And we're going to continue. That's right. SEQ, Western Queens. We are all united in this fight. And again, if we want to talk about housing as a human right, this is where, in this city right now, this is where that conversation begins, and I'm more convinced that every single day. So thank you all so much. Looking forward to our work together. Thank all the elected partners who are here too.
Thank you. Yeah, it's all up to us, so we got to keep making noise. It's the only way. All right, I'd like to now invite Isaac Blazenstein from Julie Wan's office. Come on up. Have a few words.
Hey, everybody. I'm Isaac. I'm Julie Wan's Land Use and Legislative Director. I think Councilmember Krishnan really said it so well about why CLTs are such a good model for affordable housing and democratically controlled affordable housing. But I just want to add to that CLTs are also an amazing model for climate justice, for food justice, for childcare and healthcare, for affordable manufacturing space. These are all things that Western Queens Community Land Trust has, done the organizing around, has thought about, and it's all part of their amazing plan for the DOE building. So while, absolutely affordable housing is where we want to be, we can also use this democratically controlled land process to address all of our, most pressing needs. So really, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for the organizing you're doing. Councilmember One, is disappointed she couldn't be here, but we're really happy to be co-sponsors of all the legislation and working towards replacing the tax lien sale. And about time. And just really humbled to be here among you all. So thank you.
Thanks, Isaac. All right, so some of you might be wondering, what exactly is a community land trust? We have a lot of literature that explains it, but I will give you the short version. CLTs are basically a way for us, the community, to own land, control land in the city. We're sort of taking it off of the market and making it permanently affordable. And CLTs have been around for a while. And even in New York, we've already had a few that have been doing stuff since the 90s. But in a big way in the last few years, probably because of the housing crisis, which is not really a housing crisis, but an affordability crisis, CLTs have started to pop up more and more. And so we're all pushing. The hardest part is, of course, that land in New York is crazy expensive. And so it's very hard for a CLT to do much if they don't actually have any properties to help people with. And so that's part of these bills that you're about to learn about. But that is the issue, is like land is, as you know, expensive. But CLTs can hold the deed. So what happens is, and there's many different versions of CLTs. There's for home ownership, rental buildings, commercial buildings. But the basic idea is that the CLT holds the deed to the land. So the CLT doesn't own the building usually that the land is on. That is either you as a private homeowner or a building that is, say, a community group has decided to put together a building and they run the building. It's their building. The CLT has nothing to do with the day-to-day operations. What we do is the CLT holds the deed to the land. So that means if at some point in the future, all the idealistic people that started the project have gone, and the people that are there now are like, why don't we just sell this and make a lot of money? They can't, because the deed locks them into a permanently affordable thing, and the CLT is holding that deed. So we're kind of like the conscience that are holding the deed, says, sorry, you can't sell it. So that's what CLTs are in a very basic nutshell. And there's many variations, and there's many creative ways to go about with that. And if you're interested, we are happy to talk to you. There's a lot of people here that can talk to you about either starting a CLT, joining a CLT, or just in general how you could benefit as a potential homeowner in the future or a tenant in a building. But that's the basic idea of CLT. And so it's sort of like a new way to try to do what I was talking about with the Mitchell-Lama housing projects many years ago. The only problem is that those had loopholes that allowed people to sort of flip and make a lot of money. The CLT is a little bit different because there's only 1/3 of the people on the CLT can be those who actually live or work on the land that the CLT owns, which means even if all the people that lived on there wanted to benefit and sell it, they'd be outvoted by the other 2/3. So there's a checks and balance system that keeps you honest, hopefully forever. So we got to go, turning New York City into like a communal place to live, one house at a time. All right, we have one more elected official here. Jumaane is here. So he's going to speak now, our public advocate, Jumaane Williams. If you're ready. He's coming in from the cold. He's got to warm up first. Hi.
Peace and blessings, everybody. How are you? Love and light to you all. How's everybody doing? Just thank you, everybody, for putting this together, and happy to be in Councilman Mashaka Christian's district, and he's doing a lot of great work. The work that we're doing around Community Land Trust is extremely important. The work we're doing around pushing social housing is extremely important. Very often, homelessness and housing are talked about separately. I don't know why. So we got to make sure they are talked about together. And I keep saying the corporate model of making as much money as possible in housing is what's got us where we are. So we really just have to break up that model. That model is really what got us here. And the corporate model, similar to what I described in medicine, causes people to die because they can't get the medicine they need. That model in housing causes people to die because they can't get the housing that they need. And what we've seen last year was the highest amounts of homeless New Yorkers dying in our streets than they have ever have. What we see now is a housing market that is the highest in the nation, and some reports say even in the world, where people simply can't afford a place to stay. And my office put out a report recently that showed that while we have the highest amounts of rents, we also have the highest amounts of open cases for repairs. So we're getting a worse housing stock for more money. This has happened over decades and decades of very bad housing policy by elected officials who take a lot of money from people who make a lot of money off this model to keep this model going. So I'm really hoping what we can do is push forward something else where people will support the type of housing we're talking about here. I have one of the resos that has to do with TOPA, which is tenants being able to purchase their buildings. And I know my colleague has COPA, which is similar, giving nonprofits and community land trusts. And there's a few other things that are there. But really what we have to make sure is we take out a lot or some of the drive to make as much money and profit when people actually just need a place to live. The government hasn't been involved in this type of thing for a very long time. The last time they did something like this was Mitchell-Lama, and it turned out really well, actually, and those are the type of houses that people want to be in. So housing is needed because if you don't have a place to live, it's hard to do your homework and focus in school. If you don't have a place to live, it's hard to get well if you're able to go to the hospital and get medical assistance. So this is a right that people have to have. And all across the country, we're seeing this. The pandemic has only made things worse. These problems existed before, and we continue to try to tell folks that it was a problem. And my hope is that, we recognize the folks we lost, tens of thousands of people we lost. And the one thing I think we can do in their memory is not go back to normal. But it looks like that's what we're doing. We're doing the same thing we did before the pandemic that lost us lives, that brought us here. And so my hope is that we can push leaders and elected officials to do something different when it comes to housing. Community land trust, social housing is the way to do that. We have to force the city and the state to do that. Hopefully we can start with the budget that's here and get these bills passed. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Peace and blessing, love and light to you all. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a website here, and also along the side, it's a little tiny URL. That will take you straight to being able to contact your city council person. You got to remember, this machine only moves if we light the fire underneath. And so we need everybody to tell your council person that you want them to pass this legislation and more. Tell them anything that's on your mind. And many of the folks, obviously the folks that are here tonight are with us, but they still need to hear from you, even if they're already with us, because they need to know that this actually matters to you. Your constant chatter and ringing is what lets them constantly know what they need to focus on and so on. And so it's not just the fact that we already know that they agree with us. They need to hear from you all the time, 24/7. So you need to, if not only contact them, but tweet it, post it on Facebook, post it on Instagram, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your coworkers, and spread the word, because this can't be a little small niche thing. It has to be a citywide movement that pushes our officials to push our government, to push the land back into the hands of the people. So now we're going to tell you about this legislation, and to do that, we have New Economy Project's Will Spisak, who's here hobbling along to the microphone.
All right, how's everyone doing? All right. So Memo was telling us about what a community land trust is, and if a CLT is all about taking land off the speculative market to make sure it's never flipped, sold for profit, speculated on. the big question facing us is, how do we get COTs, our communities, to acquire that land? We can, try and purchase it, but if you've tried to buy a house or an apartment or a vacant lot in New York City, it's very expensive. So we need policies that put land directly in the pipeline to community land trusts so we can build that deep affordable housing, the community space and the commercial space our communities need. So all of you should have received this packet. If you haven't, you can pick it up at the front that talks about the bills. I'm sorry, I failed to introduce myself. My name is Will Spizak, by the way, with New Economy Project, and we are the co-coordinators of the New York City Community Land Initiative. And the Community Land Initiative has been pushing this package called the Community Land Act in City Council. And it's made up of 4 different pieces of legislation that we're fighting for. The first one I want to mention is Intro 637. It's called Public Land for Public Good. It's very basic, simple principle. The city of New York owns a ton of land, and from time to time they sell that land for development. Historically, the city has sold that land to private developers. As recently as 2019, 75% of public land was sold to for-profit developers for as little as $1 for a lot. So guess what they did? They build something, they flip it, they make a ton of profit, all on our backs, right? Because the value of that land comes from us, from the community. So what we're saying is, if the city wants to dispose of public land, they want to sell it, we want to pass this bill that says you have to prioritize community land trusts or other qualified nonprofits in that process to make sure that COTs get a first crack at any public land that the city is selling. And I think that's a pretty reasonable ask. What do you think? Yes. The other 2 pieces I want to mention, we have this Intro 196. It's called the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, or COPA. And this bill is also very simple. It says COTs and other qualified nonprofit housing developers should have a right to make a first offer when a big multifamily building goes up for sale. So a landlord decides they want to sell their building. No one's forcing them to do it. No one's compelling them to do it. They decide they want to sell. The COT should have the right to make a first offer and get their foot in the door. And this is based on legislation that's already in places like San Francisco. So we know it works. It gives us a first crack at acquiring property when a landlord wants to sell. So all of those bad landlords, when they want to sell, they can't sell it to their friends first. They got to give us first crack. Just like that one, we're also fighting for something called the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, or TOPA. This is a state bill, so in the city, we're just fighting to pass a resolution that calls on the state to pass TOPA. And this would give tenants, that's right, you, if you're a tenant in a building, it would give you the right to collectively organize your neighbors to make a first offer on a building when your landlord decides to sell. Or you can decide to partner with a community land trust that already exists to make sure that they get that building when the landlord decides to sell. So essentially, it does a similar thing to COPA, but gives more rights to the tenants to organize and to purchase that building collectively. So I think if you've been paying rent for decades, you have a right to own that building. What do you think? There you go. And then the last thing we'll mention is we're also fighting for the permanent abolition of the predatory tax lien sale in New York City. The tax lien sale has been used as a way to strip wealth and equity, particularly from black and brown neighborhoods, for decades since Giuliani was mayor. And I think it's time that we let that Giuliani error fade from our law books. And we create a new equitable system for collecting taxes that gives COTs an opportunity to keep people in their home. If someone is behind on their taxes, let's say a senior living in Southeast Queens, and they want to stay in their home, they should have the right to work with the COT who could acquire the land, and they remain the owners of that house, and they can continue to live in that home, and they can have their debt forgiven by transferring the land. But when they decide to sell or they pass on or something along those lines, we make sure that that house stays affordable and that's not preyed upon by predatory investors or house flippers. So we want to make sure that whatever replaces the lien sale is better and gives COTs more opportunities. So if you support all of these ideas, please use your phones to use that URL and send a message to your council member saying, we want the Community Land Act passed. And I'm going to pass it over to some of our local COTs to talk specifically about what they're working on and how these bills will help advance their community land trusts in your neighborhood right here. Thank you, everyone. I think the first one up is Western Queens COT is going to talk, so we're going to have Jenny come up.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, I'm going to leave my mask on then. So the Community Land Act includes a bill called the Public Land for Public Good portion of the bill, and Will just described it. And this bill would prioritize CLTs and other nonprofits. As we know, the city has a history of giving land away to for-profit developers that actually belongs to us. So this would directly affect the Western Queens CLT and the work that we do, because our first big project that we're working on, and we want to branch out to others, but the first one is, as many of you know, for a very large Department of Education building. It's a public building on the former Amazon HQ site, which we did defeat. All of us did. That land is a publicly owned, gigantic manufacturing building. It's not zoned for living, it's zoned for making things. Why should that property and that giant building not belong to the community that surrounds it? Queensbridge houses are 10 blocks away, with all the high-rises and luxury going up around Queens Plaza and in Long Island City. There's never anything that really directly benefits the people who live in Queensbridge. There's never anything that benefits street cart vendors, that benefits manufacturers who are displaced from the industrial areas that are being given over to luxury towers, hotels, and self-storage facilities. And there's even commercial use that's very, very luxury and high-end that no one can afford. And that's another problem with a lot of these city-owned plots that are often industrial areas. The EDC, you can boo now, the EDC, which is a city quasi-public, quasi-private agency that stewards a lot of these industrial and city-owned sites, never gives the land to the community. They never use it for equitable purposes. Like in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, they're putting up luxury light manufacturing. Who can afford the rents there? Not the small businesses that used to be there, not the manufacturers who give good jobs to the community, certainly not working artists who often, and musicians and dancers who often have space in these buildings. They go to higher-end, high rent payers, architecture firms, tech firms, fancy food courts, which only offer minimum wage jobs to the surrounding community. This has to be reversed. We need equitable economic development, and that's what we're looking to do in the DOE building, which we have called the Queensboro People Space, assuming that we get it, which we will. And we want a different kind. That's what's one thing that CLTs can do. There are other CLTs in the city, like the Ravenswood CLT, which is going to come up and speak, who are also looking to get some city-owned property in Long Island City right next to Ravenswood houses. These kind of city-owned properties, whether residential is built on them, whether they're empty lots that the NYPD uses to park their cars, like in East New York, and there's the East New York CLT is working on getting those for the community, or whether they're the DOE building, all of these city-owned properties should go to benefit the public, and right now, they do not. So that's one way that CLTs, this bill could really help CLTs. I also did want to give another shout out to Sugar Ray. You know, when we go around, our model for the building is right there on our table, and if you're interested in learning more after the event, please go sign up. Our sign-up sheet, you can look at the model, you can take it apart. We have a very beautiful plan that involves food justice, it involves Hot Bread Kitchen and the Street Vendor Project, it involves affordable spaces for artists, for manufacturers, and social service agencies, nonprofits. And we really need this bill, and it would directly affect us and help us. And I just lost my train of thought. I think there was one more thing I wanted to say. What was it? Oh, yeah, Sugar Ray, thank you. So what I was going to say is that we've been doing a lot of outreach with this model and telling people in the community, including Queensbridge and a lot of neighborhoods around, and people respond to this. They really do. And Sugar Ray is an artist. He's a filmmaker. He's a community organizer, and this really resonates with him. So I think what he's doing Sugar Ray is a very special person with a lot of kind of charisma, but his decision to do that is a reflection of the kind of passion that people have for their land. These are our communities, these are our buildings, they belong to us on this public land. So I encourage you all to just go to 44th Drive and Vernon Boulevard. He'll be there he's there 24/7. He's got a little green tent. The police are letting him stay, interestingly. Stop by and say hi. He's a really interesting guy to talk to, and you can see the building. He's right outside the building, and it's just a very cool thing to do. So I think that is that, and am I passing it to someone? Chaya. Chaya and the Queen's CLT.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Cool. Great, so my name is Jessica Balgobin. I am a member of the Queens CLT Working Group, a group that's been convened by Chaya CDC to educate and organize around community land trust. Okay, thanks Nadia. So Chaya is a community-based organization that's been working to build the housing stability, economic well-being, and the power of South Asian and Indo-Caribbean community across New York City. Chaya has a really long history of tenant organizing in Queens, starting with the buildings owned by Vantage in the early 2000s to the BRG buildings in Jackson Heights and the Zara buildings in Jamaica. Our tenant organizing work has consisted of creating tenant associations and coalitions across Queens, and also providing tenant counseling for issues like landlord harassment, evictions, and other violations. We are also part of a citywide movement for housing justice, which has been critical in fighting for stronger rental laws and tenant rights in New York City. So this movement has existed for decades in New York City, and yet we find ourselves having to fight the same fight over and over again without being closer to resolving this housing crisis. For these reasons, we convened the Queens Community Land Trust Working Group in order to organize around land and collective ownership. This group was formed with the recognition and understanding that we cannot resolve this housing crisis without creating truly and deeply affordable housing and without prioritizing those who are the most affected by this crisis. So not only do we need land and property, but we need to create realistic opportunities for groups like us and other CLTs like those here today, and tenants across New York City to remain in their homes and communities. So I know some folks mentioned TOPA and COPA. So TOPA and COPA does exactly that by allowing tenants and community groups the first chance to make an offer when a landlord puts up their property for sale. This evens the playing field, and if done correctly, would provide the funds and means to actually do so. So if the Zara Realty buildings that I mentioned earlier go up for sale tomorrow, and TOPA and COPA were already passed, this campaign that Chaya's Bangladeshi Tenant Union and Zara Tenant Coalition that have been fighting for over the last 7 years and continue to fight for could come to an end. We could live in a world where tenants don't have to fight their landlord every year, sometimes every month, to not raise the rent or evict them, where they and many of their neighbors and the small businesses that make up the community would not be under a constant threat of displacement if they could collectively own the buildings that they live in. This is why we formed Queens CLT. And TOPA and COPA is what we need as a group to make the vision for the housing justice and anti-displacement movement to become a reality and preserve our neighborhoods and communities. Also wanted to shout out that we have our Queens CLT table over here. Bright is at the station. Feel free to talk to Bright and sign up if you're interested in joining our Queens CLT. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shamika Jones. I am part of the Ravenswood CLT. I'm one of the founders.
Guys, let's give it up for Shamika. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Lorenzo Brea. I'm also one of the co-founders of the Ravenswood CLT, born and raised in Ravenswood. And so just to kick this off, I want to just thank Western Queens CLT. I want to thank all the partners here. I want to thank everybody that's here, because I think this is one of the biggest steps in taking a step that we took as just some people that were in a meeting that we weren't really sure about what we could do as people in our community, but that saw a fire in each other and in our community for justice, equity, and owning land, and making sure that we can make these things happen for ourselves and our community. So I want you guys to give yourselves a round of applause just being here. So yes, we were inspired by visioning sessions by the Western Queens CLT when a DSNY garage that has sat in the middle of Ravenswood for over 40, 50 years has been polluting our air. Western Queens CLT came in and said, hey, Ravenswood, you guys have an opportunity to own this land using a CLT model. And, we can provide, the structure, and you guys can own it as a community. And so me, Shamika, and a couple others were inspired to actually create a new CLT model that was gonna be Ravenswood from top to bottom. So we were gonna be the organizers, we were gonna be the owners, we were gonna be the lessees of the land, and that's really something that those are the principles that we want to stick to and that we want to inspire within public housing developments all across the city. I mean, there's hundreds of them. So out in Edgemere, in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, everywhere, it's a model that we think could also take place over there. And so as of right now, we are really in the beginning stages of putting this together in our community. I mean, we have a very small, focused community. Ravenswood has been impacted by the DSNY garage for decades, and so we want to make sure that we're the people who reap the benefits of now an opportunity coming before us and coming before, truly a black and brown community that has been marginalized in so many more ways than I can tell you here tonight. So I'm gonna bring Shamika up to tell you exactly how we do that with the small funds and the small energy that we have within Ravenswood right now.
Hello. So what we do, our events are primarily our primary way to keep spirits high in Ravenswood while informing our community about owning land. So our most recent event we had was our third annual Halloween event. It turned out in the hundreds, which it always does. We always engage all of the families to participate in the event. And also, we have a group where we focus on conversations with parents about Ravenswood owning the DSNY plot of land collectively. So I always say community at the end of every event that we have, but if you guys don't mind, I just wanna, on a count of three, just yell community for me, because that's what it's all about. 1, 2, 3, community! I'll pass it over to Lorenzo.
Yeah, so we have Juneteenth events, we have silent parties, just any opportunity that we can to bring our community together, make sure that it's informational and educational about the goals that we have as an organization. And so as of right now, we're currently being incorporated. We're hoping to hear back from the state within the next couple of days just to become official. But if you guys want to hear more information about the Ravenswood CLT, the model, and how we think it can apply to so many other black and brown communities across the city, we'll be right over here. Thank you.
And we have one more CLT from Queens, not to be forgotten in the Rockaways. Edgemere always keeps it real, so it's the real Edgemere CLT.
Good night, everybody. How's everybody doing? So, I'm Alexis Smallwood-Foote, and I am the founder of the Real Edgemere CLT. The Real Edgemere CLT is a community-led land development and management organization. Its activities are directed by the surrounding community to facilitate a just, equitable, and resilient community. The CLT will develop places and programming in order to cultivate physical, economic and housing and cultural vibrancy. So I came to Far Rockaway when I was a single mom, 22, out of the shelter. I had been living in the shelter from the time I was 17 up until I had Alexander at 22. Him and I ended up going to a family and leaving my mom ended up going to a single one. Hurricane Sandy happened in 2012, and I was like, yo, I gotta go back home. I was with my mom in the Bronx, and I said, Ma, they're gonna gentrify Far Rockaway. I gotta go back home. I gotta organize the community members and tell them what's gonna happen. And surely but slowly, L&M, Bluestone, Triangle Equity came in there with our politicians, and we became unrent stabilized. We went under HPD, and now we're all paying market value rent, right? And I was like, yes, boo! So I said, I gotta start gathering up all this private land and public land that's out here. We have so much public land that's out here. Me and my team won the RFEI from HPD for the Edgemere CLT. We have acquired 116 lots, which will be for home ownership, economic development, and green and open spaces. We are fighting to make sure that we bring some form of reparations to the residents that have been living in Far Rockaway and Edgemere for over 50 years, suffering neglect and abuse. If you come to my community, we are a desert. We are a desert when it comes to food. We are a desert when it comes to health care. We are a desert when it comes to education. And we are a desert when it comes to amenities. For our kids to go to a skate park, they literally have to go to the other side of town to enjoy themselves. And then even then, they have to be worried about racism, right? The institutional racism that has been bedding the west side of Rockaway for so many years. So for me, starting the Real Edgemere COT, it was rooted in reparations, not only for myself, but for my ancestors. My ancestors used to clean for the Jewish people in Rockaway when it was a resort town, right? And so you know how long ago that was, right? And so now I feel like my community and I have an opportunity to create a space that's inclusive for our allies, but really for us, the Black and brown community that is literally suffering and figuring out where it's all going wrong. We have major developments that are being developed right now. And if you go out into my community and you ask the Black and brown people, hey, do you know what's going on? They don't have a goddamn clue what's going on. They don't know why all this stuff is being built, how it got built. If you're not in the know, you're not in the know. So I'm here for the voices that feel left out. I'm a NYCHA baby. That's another thing too, y'all. We gotta, not only do we have to worry about the CLTs and the private land, but we also have to make sure that we hold the fire to their feet when it comes to the NYCHA land trust, because that's just another way to gentrify and get rid of Black and brown people. They didn't want the projects, right? 20, 30 years now. Now that they're like, oh my God, the projects is very valuable. We can't, no, don't come over here. That's how I feel right now. And if we honestly got to get back to the Black Panther, Young Lords mindset, then that's what we're going to have to do to let them know that we're not playing with them. Like, you thought you had smoke on January 6th? No, we got to get them the real smoke. All right, thank you so much, everybody. Have a good day.
Yeah, wow. So, you know, remember the bills that the resolutions, the ballot questions that we all voted yes on? That was about Black and brown communities. I mean, that were literally, these are examples, right? Ravenswood, Edgemere, Rockaways. Like, the city has made a promise that this is important to the city. So we need to tell the city, we need to highlight these communities and these CLTs and let them know, if you want to put your money where your mouth is, here's the money, here's where the money needs to go. So please, write to your council people, here's the URL, but more than that, get involved. Like, follow all these groups, sure, share it on social media, sure, but join us. Like, we are open. Anybody that wants to join us, or if you live in Ravenswood, or if you live near Edgemere, wherever you live, there's a CLT near you. So join the group, be a part of it. We are open, we want people, if you're passionate about this stuff, then do something about it so that we can make a difference. We need bodies, we need brains. All right, so now we have Rachel, who's gonna come up and do an exercise with you guys, so about everything, sort of recapping everything we've been talking about, so it's a little more interactive now. Take it away.
Hello, how you doing? Don't fade on us yet. We're gonna also have a Q&A after this portion, but this is a town hall, so we wanted to give everyone a chance to talk if you don't get a chance to ask a question during the Q&A after this. So we are going to ask you to do a little pair share. If you are too old and you didn't do pair shares when you were in school, that means you turn to your partner, turn to someone next to you, and that will be your partner. we do have some people using translation services tonight, so if you don't have someone sitting next to you who speaks your language, raise your hand so that we can make sure to pair you up with someone who speaks your language. And then we want you to introduce yourself, share your name and your neighborhood, and then you can talk to each other for a few minutes about what has been exciting to you about the bills that you've heard about tonight. What are you confused about? And what do you want to know more about? Just to get the juices flowing. And you guys can help each other remember what you heard, ask each other questions, maybe answer each other's questions a little bit before we come back to the front for our Q&A. All right, and I've got these instructions on these pieces of paper that we'll pass out as well. So pair up. All right, bringing our conversations to a close. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. If you can hear my voice, say Community Land Trust.
I'm terrible at that, so thank you, Rachel. So I guess from your discussions and just your own thoughts, does anyone have anything they either want to share or do they have a question? And we have lots of people here that can answer. Yeah.
Hi, I get the basic concept is presumably you're running a nonprofit, whatever they do with the land helps the state. Can you speak more in terms of the initial financing? How do they arrange to get their hands on a building like the big Burnish building? For example, if SOPA passes, how does the tenants who have that first right get financed to actually buy the co-op?
Right. Actually, that's a good question for. Do you want to speak about COPA and so on? Because that's a good, or TOPA? Because that part I don't know as well. So.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks. So usually a community land trust, if it's going to be acquiring property through something like COPA or TOPA or purchasing it on the open market, will, just like any other purchaser, have to put together a capital stack, right? Different sources of funding. So usually that includes like some kind of public subsidy. There's a number of programs that are available at the state and city level. There's a New York City Acquisition Fund that we can tap into. The state's Housing and Community Renewal Department actually just put out an RFP for community-controlled housing. It's not a lot of money, but it's a start. So there are resources, public resources out there. And then a lot of the CLTs also work with private financing. We have the example of the East Harlem El Barrio Community Land Trust, which has 4 properties. And they worked with the Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union to be able to finance some of that. So there's a good kind of symbiotic relationship between community-controlled finance and community-controlled land and housing. But one thing that we're pushing for is, even though we get these bills, like you pointed out, we need more resources and more funding. So we're pushing for the state to increase its support for community-controlled housing, and we'll do the same thing at the city level, because if you don't have the dollars, right, it's kind of hard to make it a reality. So that's going to be step 2 of the campaign, to make sure we get it.
If you get first shot at it, then it's not available to everyone on the market. You cut off some of the demand, and that helps keep some of the prices low.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a question we all ask ourselves. And actually, if you start doing research about CLTs nationwide, for example, the Oakland CLT has been very creative in their fundraising. They've been crowdsourcing, literally like kickstarting buildings, and community has kicked in, and they've bought actual buildings and property community-wide. So there's all sorts of creative ways to do it. Does anyone else have a question? Yeah. Sure, go ahead.
My name is John McFarland. I'm with Buffalo, New York. Some of you might know me, some of you might not. I'm from South Jamaica, Queens. But community land trust rare is available. I'm out here today because I value what you folks are talking about, and I want to see that type of recruitment and participation in my area. I'm going to shout out to my brother, Dr. Bright Leland, for giving me the opportunity, making the inroad for me to speak. I don't want to take up too much time. I just want to say that we need community land trust around here. And behind the Queens machine, it is fucking incredibly difficult to get community land trust out here. And the Queens machine consists of Gregory Meeks on down. A couple folks have been trying. It's been incredibly difficult. I respect my sister who comes from Edgemere. We talk about community land trust out here. It's a little easier, right? On that side. It's not technically South Jamaica, Queens, right? They're on the edge, the peninsula. But where I'm from, it is incredibly difficult. And there's so much advantages to community land trust that I can't go into it in the limited time I got. And just, I'm going to be here to work with folks, and hopefully folks can venture out to Southeast Queens and work with me. Thank you.
So, do you know 5 or 10 people in your community that are interested in this? I mean, get them together, reach out to here's how we did it. We didn't know anything about CLTs. We had fought Amazon. The Amazon thing ended. We had no clue what to do next. We're like, we got to do something, or this building is going to be given to Google or whatever. And we just started reaching out. And other wonderful CLTs like South Bronx came and they told us and they talked to us, here's what we did, and so on. And New Economy Project came and they said, listen, this is how it works. People, all these people are resources for you. We're all here for you. So make sure you get all our numbers and emails. And if you can get 5, 10 people together, just start having meetings. We'll come down, help you at least start. You got to start the paperwork. You got to start like the basic building blocks. But once you're a real thing, then you start hammering on doors and making phone calls with all the elected officials. Let them know you exist, right? And you don't even need a lot of money at first. You just need to like start making some noise as a collective. So we can help you. We can totally help you. Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a really good question. So he's asking, when does it make sense to start a CLT versus joining a CLT? And so, I mean, in a way, it's somewhat philosophical, and in a way, it's somewhat practical. So, like, Western Queens CLT, we just sort of said, well, there's a sort of communal shared needs here in Western Queens. And what is Western Queens? It's not like a definite geographical area, but we all kind of know that all of us, like along the 7 train, basically, all the way to like Flushing Meadows Park, right, is like, we kind of are all dealing with the same sort of stuff. And so we thought, well, we'll just say Western Queens. And anybody in Western Queens that needs help, like we will work with the communities all throughout. But as you heard earlier from Ravenswood, right, like we went to them, we said, hey, there's this project, and they decided, you know what, we could join Western Queens, but it is really important, specifically with our history and our neighborhood's history, it's really important that we own this, we run this from the ground up. You know, no shade on Western Queens Community Land Trust, but we got to do our own thing. So, and that made sense, right? Like, so they could have joined us and just been like one of the projects that WQCLT does. They decided it made more sense to do that. It was a philosophical thing, and so and we know we've been supporting them from the very beginning, and it makes a lot of sense. So and Chaya, you know, Chaya is technically within Western Queens, right? But they have a very specific community that they serve, and so they decided they needed a CLT. They actually started before us, but so the point is, I don't know how to answer that specifically, other than like, I would say if you're thinking of, if you have a project in mind, maybe approach the CLT, like for example us, and then as you talk and work out, you may at some point be like, you know what, we're going to start our own, it makes more sense for X or Y reason. But there's not like a hard and fast rule. But you know, feel it out. But I think it'll become clear once you start discussing with neighbors and community members. Yeah. Oh, sorry, the person behind you.
We
we were curious a little bit if CLTs have to be 501c3 nonprofits by definition. Are they public? What do they fall under? And then some of the language on some of these acts says not-for-profit developers are also able to, own this, or qualified not-for-profit. What does that mean?
That's a really good question. I think Will should probably answer that part of it, but what the first part is, you don't have to be a 501c3. We're not a 501c3 yet. There's at a certain point where it makes sense to become a 501c3 once you start dealing with large buildings and big chunks of money. But you don't have to be one right away. So we're just a nonprofit, which really is just a group of people who write bylaws and mail it in, and the state sends you back a piece of paper that says you are now a nonprofit. We have a fiscal sponsor with Woodside on the Move. So if we get a grant, the grant goes to them, and they take a small percentage for all the work and processing that they have to do. And the rest goes to the CLT. So that's how you can start. You don't have to start big or have like a huge staff or anything, and then you slowly rise up. And we're going through that now. We're trying to figure out, because we're all volunteers basically. We have one part-time staffer, and so yeah, let's shout out to our one part-time staffer. I don't know where she is. But that's Pam, by the way. But yeah, we got that. We started with nothing. Thankfully, New Economy Project, Nicely, is this umbrella organization that helps CLTs. They're sort of like the umbrella CLT organization. So there's a lot of support. If you're serious and you're organized and you're not just kind of messing around, people will come and help you, and we're like Pinocchio. We're becoming like a real boy somehow. We started as a puppet, so we'll get there. All right, Will's got the second part of your question.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So in all honesty, there's the answer to why it's more than just community land trust is a little bit political. So I think there was some recognition that CLTs are still relatively new and young in New York City. Our oldest one has been around since the 90s. And there was, some recognition that we would probably have to broaden the scope if we were going to get these bills passed. That being said, we negotiated with kind of bill drafters. For COPA, for instance, there's language about being a qualified purchaser, meaning HPD would have to approve of a certain list of preservation buyers who could qualify to make a COPA offer. So originally that list included for-profit preservation buyers, and we were not having that, right? We didn't want more for-profits to be able to take advantage of this. So we pushed back and said, we would love this to be at least pared down just to the nonprofits, right, that qualify on your list, and community land trusts. So we were able to get that passed. And then with, the public land disposition bill, it was similar recognition that the CLT movement is still relatively small, and we have a large, community development corporation movement in New York City that we could tie that to. But certainly, we did everything we could in the bill language to prioritize CLTs and make sure that they were kind of named front and center, so that as we build this movement, we have this tool that we can use. And I think that's the one thing that we want to always get across, is that we're never going to legislate our way out of a problem, right? A bill is a tool that we can use as organizers to get what we want, but the organizing is the most important part of it. So keep organizing and we'll win.
And the other part of that is, as CLTs start to gain more power and actual laws start to pass, you can bet the developers are going to find ways to use those loopholes and languages to do the same thing and sneak in through the back door. So we have to be very careful about that. So it's a really good question, what exactly define that? Yeah. Oh, sorry. He was. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is really cool. It's new to me, so thank you for describing it really well. As this expands, the one fear that I sort of have, and I hope that there's an answer to this, is how do we avoid this just becoming large handouts to property owners?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a good question. So the basic way of doing that is what I was referring to earlier, that the DNA, the makeup of the CLT board itself, does not allow any one group to sort of have a controlling interest. So the way CLTs traditionally work is that 1/3 of the people in the CLT are on the property itself. Like they're people, for example, they're tenants who live in that property. Another third are community members, but not tenants who don't have like a selfish, quote unquote, stake in the property. They are just in the community. And another third are folks who understand CLTs and understand land and urban. They could be professors, college professors, academics, who are there to give sort of an advisory. They understand, but they're not necessarily from the community. So they kind of check and balance each other.
What about during the initial acquisition process?
Wait, sorry, what about that?
When you're first raising the money to get the land, is that just funneling cash to landowners?
Yeah, maybe. So you're saying when you're trying to buy the land itself. Yes. So you have to buy somebody, right? You have to buy the land from. Sorry, I was not quite understanding. Yeah, I mean, so there's different things. There's public land, right? Obviously. Then there's like the tax lien sale. There's a lot of land that the city, that people fall out of debt, and that's one of the bills that we're trying to work with. So those are two things that wouldn't be falling cash to any landowner. But there are cases where somebody has land, right? And they spent whatever money, they want to turn a profit. Maybe they'll sell it to CLT at a discount, maybe not. I mean, at some point, they're going to make some money off of that thing. The idea is to then earmark that land permanently forward so that it no longer can retroactively go to some, be flipped to someone else. But if you're saying like, how do you avoid giving a penny to anybody at any point who owns land, I'm not sure if there's an answer. Do you have a better answer? Because that's a good question.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think, ultimately, Memo described it correctly that if it's going to be a COPA or TOPA purchase, the landowner is going to earn a return on their property. The exception to that could be the use of eminent domain, which we didn't talk about and isn't really mentioned in these bills. Some COTs have been successfully able to use eminent domain, particularly in Massachusetts, in Boston. I'm blanking on the name. Douglas Street, thank you. They were able to use eminent domain to acquire property, but the city is usually very reluctant to use its power of eminent domain unless it benefits some rich person. But in our case, we're not going to put a lot of eggs in that basket. And I think to some degree, property owners that we imagine we can work with. Some of them will be, the bad landlords and everything like that. But we would want, if it's a community member who bought their home 30 years ago and wants to make sure it stays in community hands, we want them to be able to retire, right, and be able to earn a return on that home. We just want to make sure that in the future it's not speculated on. So yeah, it's imperfect, definitely, but I think it's a great question and definitely a lot of tools that we can use in the toolbox.
Just the one thing that comes to my mind is I totally think it's a good question, but we are, even if you're paying out one time for property, you're taking that property permanently off the speculative market. So once CLTs have property, it's never going to be sold for profit again.
Yeah, I mean, we should be clear that if the world works the way it should work, you wouldn't need CLTs, right? You would have a government that just does that. So we're this imperfect sort of half-assed solution in a capitalist machine that isn't thinking socially. And so you're bringing up a good point, but it is the nature of the beast that we're all stuck in. Hi, yeah.
Yeah, is there anything in CLT structures or ways of buying land that kind of offset balances of barriers for example, communities that are usually barred from ever having a home, and not just for economic reasons, but for legal reasons? I'm mentioning, for example, undocumented workers or whatnot. So is there anything, for example, that would work for undocumented people to make a CLT and be able to own, for example?
So the undocumented question is interesting. That one I'm not so sure because of the legal issues of being undocumented. However, when a CLT creates its bylaws and its sort of mission statement, if that is a target, right? Then you make that a target and you say that's what the kind of properties we're going to focus on. And if it means that the CLT creates some kind of LLC that owns a building for undocumented people, so that technically the undocumented folks can't own because they're not documented, but for all intents and purposes, it's their building and they run it. I mean, at that point, it's sort of up to the CLT to figure out how to navigate the crazy legal system. But definitely, like, making that a priority and putting that in your bylaws and mission statement as, like, this is what we exist for, is totally within the whole point of a CLT, for sure.
Oh, so that means that CLTs can come in different, they can have a mission statement, and that can actually be, how they structure.
Yeah, you can put it in the actual deed, right? You can say this deed specifically targets like this group, and especially like, again, this goes back to like the ballot questions that we just voted for, right? If the city said it's a priority to specifically help the communities that have been historically ignored and marginalized, then if you can leverage that law and say, that's the kind of thing where it's like you just need to start to getting people together and pushing. But there are pieces in the legislation that are now specifically speaking about what you're saying. So if you can convince the city that this is one of those cases, you start funneling the money that way. I don't know if there's anything more. Oh yeah, we are running out of time. So I'll stop talking. Does anyone else have another question? Yeah.
Just going back to the question earlier about 501c3s. So if there's a community land trust that's not a nonprofit, like who's on the hook for the property taxes? Like how do you interact with the property tax?
Well, just to be clear, like you have to be a nonprofit. You just don't have to be a 501c3 when you start. I think by the time you start acquiring land, there's a whole long time between starting and then actually having your first building. By the time you're getting to that point, you do need to become a 501c3. So it's not that you never have to, but it's not like the prerequisite to begin with. Does that answer your question, or? Okay, feel free to talk to, and actually probably Will is a better person than me to chat that up, but sure. Sorry, did somebody else have a question? Oh, okay, this will be the last question. Go ahead, sorry.
So what's the next suggested, or what's the next plan as far as the next town hall, or what do you suggest people to do besides, make as much noise as possible, write to Congress, get involved, urge the bill to be passed?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is oh, come on up, Elise.
That was my section, which is right now. Hey, everyone. I'm Elise with New Economy Project. So thanks for that question. I don't know who asked it. So there's a few things you can do, one of which involves a game where Will needs to get his phone. Okay. But while he does that, I'll say we are collecting sign-ons of organizations who endorse our bill platform. We already have 110 organizations signed on, which is pretty amazing, but we want more. We're gonna deliver it soon to City Council, to the mayor. We want that list to be as long as possible. So please go to our website, which is, we'll send it out to you if you signed in, but nicely.org, you can fill out a form and endorse the campaign. Please contact your city council members. Please join your CLTs. Okay, so before we leave, we have a game. It's a contest, and somebody's gonna win. It's called Contact Your Council Member Right Now. That's the name of the game. Will gets copied on every email that gets sent through this link, and the first person that sends an email wins and will receive a prize. So, everyone take out their phone. Let's see. Take out your phone, okay. There's no service? No one has service? You better run. You better run outside. Service is better over here, people. Okay, Tiny.
they should do it on the.
All right, fine, you can do it on your way out. You can write a note, and it'll still apply. If you send it, you'll get that prize. So tiny, TINY, .cc / capital A, lowercase ct, capital C, capital A, L, capital A. So tiny.cc / act, CLA, and it matters that the A, CLA are capitalized. Yes? No, Will be keeping his crutches. We're not evil. If you are the first one, Will is going to know, and you're going to get that prize. So we're going to follow up. All right. Thanks, everybody.
So that's it. We got to wrap up. But, you know, grab our emails, grab our phones. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you at other things. Stay tuned. Have a good night.